Well, my name is Michelle Wright. I am originally from Tuskegee, Alabama, and I live in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I am a very extremely proud member of the Now Included family. So I am so honored to be here talking about rare and genetic diseases, especially in underrepresented groups. That's very, very special to me. And so I really look forward to this opportunity to spend time with Juanice Mickles and get to know her. But I want to give you all the opportunity for her to introduce herself so you can know more about her as we dive into Within the World is Lupus. So Juanice, would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Michelle, and the rest of the Now Included family. I'm so happy to be a member, and thank you so much for all your support thus far. My name is Juanice Mickles. I'm a research associate with the Westchester Biotech Project. I'm also a full-time business student, and as I said, a new member to Now Included, and a native New Yorker.
That is so wonderful. And what we're talking about today is so important. And although many people have probably heard of lupus, I'm sure there are so many that have not. So can you tell us, Juanice, what is lupus?
Sure. Lupus is one of, I believe, there's 80 known autoimmune diseases. An autoimmune disease, first of all, our immune system is supposed to help us fight against infections. With an autoimmune disease, your body is basically attacking healthy cells, believing that they are an infection, that there's a danger. So with lupus, and there are different types of lupus, lupus affects many organs. It can affect your skin, it can affect your heart, your lungs, your brain. The interesting thing, and I was just explaining this to someone before we got on this call, who called me and said, you know, I never realized you had lupus. The thing about lupus is that it looks different for everyone. No two people, I believe, have the same lupus story. No two people have the same symptoms. No two people get sick at the same time. So it's a very complex disease.
That is true. It's interesting that you mentioned no two people have the same symptoms. So lupus is different for everyone, as you and I both know, sharing both of our testimonies. So if you feel comfortable sharing, what's unique symptoms that you actually experience?
Sure. And it's an interesting story because I've always been the type of person to be on the go. I never really paid attention to, okay, there's a bruise here, there's, you know, this is happening. I would just be on the go. So I started noticing about a decade ago that I would come in from the cold and my fingers would have no blood in them. I could literally look at my fingers and say, these fingers look like, you know, that they're white and they're painful. And what is this? And I would have to run my hands under hot water for about 5 minutes just to get the circulation and the blood going. And my friends would be like, what is going on? So that happened for a while. I kind of ignored it. Other things started happening. I noticed that, and I was a huge beach goer years ago, but I would come in from the beach and, you know, even if I had sunblock on, even if I was in the shade for a while, I would come home and my face would be red and swollen. I would come home and have to take a nap. So part of lupus is lethargy that I found out later on. And that was one of the things that I kept experiencing, still kind of ignoring it. And then the real clincher was when I realized that I started to have the telltale lupus rash, which we talked about, is like that butterfly rash across the nose and under the eyes. And that's when I said, something is going on. So I did a little bit of research, and, you know, lupus was one of the things that I saw that it could be. But of course, I had to go to my doctor and figure that out.
You know, it's interesting. It's it's so easy to be in denial because we don't want to believe anything is wrong. We want to believe we just tired, or oh, my joints just hurt today. And that was major for me, joints hurting, muscle weakness. But how long did you actually experience your symptoms before you actually saw a doctor?
You know, I'm ashamed to admit this, but it took me about 1.5 to 2 years of experiencing those things to finally say, you know, especially with the butterfly rash, I need to go figure this out because something's going on. I also realized, and I looked at photos of me back then, I was so pale. And when I finally went to the doctor, they revealed that I was extremely anemic, which in and of itself does not indicate that you have lupus, right? Lupus is a series of clues, so to speak, based on your symptoms. And I had some blood work done and it was concluded that I had lupus.
Wonderful. It's interesting for our viewers who may not be aware, there's quite a few famous people who have lupus. There's Toni Braxton, Selena Gomez, the singer Seal, Nick Cannon, and many of you all may not know even Lady Gaga. So we're just glad again to have the opportunity to bring awareness to this and the journey to being diagnosed. When were you first diagnosed with lupus? I know you mentioned 10 years ago, but can you tell us a little bit more about that journey?
Sure. Somewhere around 8 to 10 years ago, I guess I was actually diagnosed, but I kept, you know, as I said, I kept having these symptoms and just trying to figure it out. And my family, you know, looking at me like, what's going on? The initial journey was interesting because, as I said, I was really in denial about it, even though I was seeing signs that pointed to lupus. You know, there were, you know, other things going on in terms of, okay, what this could be. And it was just a whole series of being really afraid more so. And thinking back on it now, I think that is so important when something happens in your body that doesn't sit right, that you know, act on it more immediately than I did. Because, you know, I feel like looking back, if things were different and it was maybe a different disease or different symptoms or what have you, that could have really been detrimental to my health. So, you know, it's really important to be your own advocate and to just start asking questions, and also to get a really good care team together and, you know, a team that you feel comfortable with, your doctors. If you have questions, make sure you're speaking up. I think many of us go to the doctor and we may take whatever the doctor says at face value without even questioning it. You know, your doctor gives you medicine. Do you have any questions about the medicine? You know, I was hesitant about what I was initially prescribed. And, you know, I got into a conversation with my rheumatologist about what this is and, you know, my concerns. So it's really important to really speak up and not be afraid to question things with your doctor.
You know, I agree, because so many of us, especially women, we have a tendency to take care of everyone else, but we want to make sure that we're taking care and advocating for ourselves. And that is so important. And as I think about my diagnosis almost 30 years ago, I didn't have the luxury of Google and looking up more information. But within the last 10 years, I believe you have. So did you actually use Google to look up your symptoms for a diagnosis before even seeing a doctor?
Yes, I did. And I also realized, though, that, you know, it's a scary process when you think something's wrong health-wise. And sometimes the more you look up, the more you may, you know, find other things like, oh, this looks like this. oh no, I immediately, I have this disease, I have that disease, and you kind of go down a rabbit hole there. So I remember that I didn't want to just start Googling too much before I actually saw my doctor first.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I remember happening, that I said, okay, this is something that I need to do for my mental health, which is also important when it comes to advocating, for your physical health. You got to take care of your mental health also.
Always, always. And it's important to get that second opinion. Google is good, but it's important to get it through the healthcare platform as well. Did you get a second opinion? And if so, who influenced that decision?
Yeah, so initially my primary care physician ran some blood tests. He looked at my symptoms and he said, I think you have lupus, but I don't want to say it. Let's send you to a really good rheumatologist. So once I got confirmation from my rheumatologist team, I went back to my primary care physician and he said, he was like, yeah, that's what I thought you had as well. So, after that, it was kind of okay, what do I do now? Which when people get diagnosed, whether it's lupus or something else, that's always the question. I mean, there's the fear because, there are things that happen when you have lupus, there's that fear, but then you also have to have some hope that all of your efforts, your care team, support, people like you guys have now included, all those things need to come together, and you need to really, it really helped me to pay attention to my support team and to have a little bit of faith.
Yes, the support team is definitely so important. And if you think back to lupus, even going 30 years back, during the time I was first diagnosed, I think about the treatment options. You had steroids, you had Plaquenil, you had Imuran, but now we have progressed to a time you have different types of biologic therapies as a breakthrough. But I am curious to know, what were your treatment options?
I mean, this was only 10 years ago, but the only thing that I was given was the Plaquenil, the hydroxychloroquine. I was told, basically like, here's your bottle of medicine, good luck. So I am not under the care of my initial rheumatologist. So I got a different care team because it really felt like, looking back, there could have been other things recommended to me besides just, here's the medicine, good luck, let us know how this goes for you. So that was really the only option that I was offered.
What's interesting that many don't know, I was born in Tuskegee, Alabama, at the same hospital they did the infamous Tuskegee syphilis experiment. And through the years, that Tuskegee experiment has been known to have impact, either directly or indirectly, the participation of African Americans in clinical trials. And clinical trials are so important from an inclusion perspective, because if you think about statistics, we know that people of all races and ethnic groups can develop lupus, but women will develop lupus much more often than men, with 9 out of every 10 people with lupus being women. Not to mention that with lupus, 3 times more common, lupus is 3 times more common in African American than Caucasian women, and it's also more serious. So if there's going to be breakthroughs in therapies, it's so incredibly important that we as African American women are included in clinical trials, which why I am so extremely grateful for Now Included, because of their work, their invaluable work in health equity and making sure that that narrative changed. But I'm curious to know, was a clinical trial ever discussed with you?
Not at all. Clinical trials were not discussed with me. I mean, even after I hesitated in taking the Plaquenil, because, as I discussed with my rheumatologist, I was concerned about side effects. So, I mean, thinking back, you would think that maybe your care team would offer other options. And I just was not offered, I was not offered the option of clinical trials, which I feel like is a shame now. And I understand, from the patient perspective, or even within the African American community, the hesitation when it comes to clinical trials, historically, as you just mentioned. But, I would have liked to have had the option of it, and I was not offered that. And I really find that to be a problem.
It's unfortunate that we did not have a now included at the time of our diagnosis, but think about all the positive impact now included will be making moving forth to help change that and to minimize those disappointments and any type of racial and ethnic disparities. So that is so exciting. I think about all the unbelievable and surreal emotions I had during my diagnosis almost 30 years ago. And what's interesting, I was diagnosed on Valentine's Day. I always say, okay, where's the love? But I know how much positive impact and having a village makes. But how did you feel after learning about your diagnosis?
I mean, obviously, I was scared, confused. I think that was probably the biggest emotion, was confusion, because I'm thinking to myself, where did this come from? How did this happen? And I read different things, like it could be genetics, it could be, environmental, my rheumatologist actually said to me, I don't know where it came from. So, and as we know, lupus is such a complex autoimmune disease that it's almost like you can't get you can't help but feeling, I can't get any straight answers here. And the biggest fear is, I don't know what's going to happen to me in the future and how this is going to affect not just me, because when you have an illness, it doesn't just affect you, it affects your family, it affects your community, it affects, the people around you, your coworkers. So I think the biggest thing for me was just confusion, and where do we go from here? And do I tell people, and how are people going to look at me? I didn't want people to look at me, in a way where I was feeling pitied. So that, there's that element also.
Yeah, I think about when I was first diagnosed and was put on high dose steroids and all the weight gain and, people judging you and not understanding what you are going through. But thank God for families, not just our now included families, but, our blood families. And I am curious, how did your family react? Because I know mine were initially in denial and say, no, you don't have lupus, but that quickly changed. But how did your family receive the news?
So I'm very close with my mother. So she's been, with me throughout this journey, and she's seen the highs and lows. She's seen the sudden inflammation. She's seen the lethargy. She was the first to point out also that one of the telltale signs of lupus is, extra facial hair. So, and I'm not afraid to say that here. I had some extra facial hair on the sides, and, there are some things that you can, you can have a little bit of a sense of humor with, but I mean, lupus is a serious disease, but there were, just things that my family was noticing about me that they said, okay, now we know why. And my initial thought also was, at least I know what it is and I don't have to, guess. I think ironically, it's better to know what it is than to be in a constant state of, I don't know what this is, and continuously, spinning your wheels trying to figure out what it is. Once I got the diagnosis, it was kind of relieving in an ironic way.
I can definitely relate, probably now more than then. But again, knowledge is potential power, because it's all about what you do with it. And it's so important to also take that knowledge to be a help, an inspiration, and a benefit to others. And that is definitely what you are and who you are, Juanice. How do you treat your symptoms now?
So as I was saying, initially I was given the Plaquenil. I took it for a while and then I stopped just because I was like, okay, let me see, which I don't necessarily recommend, but I was concerned about the medicine and I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't take it, which was, kind of a trial and error in the beginning. These days, I think I just pay more attention to how I'm feeling. There's something to be said about, kind of honing in and having that quiet space. We're all busy. We're all going a million miles an hour. Having that quiet space to really think about how I'm feeling. If I'm in the sun too long, I have to pay attention to that. If I, have some issues with my joints, or, a few months ago, the joints in my fingers were swollen. So I went to the doctor immediately. So just really just paying attention and being able to say to yourself, I know that I have 5 things to do today, but my health is more important than these 5 things, because if I am not healthy, I cannot do these 5 things. So really taking the time for yourself, which is good for not only your physical health, but also your mental and emotional health. You really need to take the time to say something's not right, or I feel like I need a break, especially as you know, with lupus, we need to take that time and say something's not right in my body. Let me just, pull back a little bit, because that's important. So these days, I think I just pay more attention to that. I try to eat well. There's the Lupus Research Alliance just put out the Lupus Diet, which was a really great guide for, making sure that you're eating right, and, different recipes, and really amazing. So eating well, exercising. I try to make sure that my mental health, stays in check. I go for walks in the park. I'm a birder. I love to look at birds. So I think the combination of your physical health, it's paying attention to your physical health, paying attention to your mental health, paying attention to your emotional and spiritual health are steps, not just for when you have lupus, but in general.
That's so important, because it's all interconnected. And we know that our viewers are interconnected with us now. We want to encourage our viewers, if you have questions, please put them in a Q&A, and we will make sure we get to do our best, at least, to get to each and every one of them. And it's interesting, as I listen to you talk about the physical, the mental, the emotional, all these different spiritual, the spiritual aspects. It's important too that we have a care team that's listening to you and that's taking you seriously. And I'm glad that you said that although you stopped taking your Plaquenil, that you do not advise that, because we do advise people, any decisions that you make as far as treatment, do it the right way through your healthcare team, healthcare professionals, your care team. And if you have a care team that you don't feel listens or values you, find one who does. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Absolutely. It's so important. I mean, nobody is going to take, I mean, you may have a team around you, but that's your health. So my advice is take control and be your own advocate.
Well, I'm sure being an advocate is one of many things that you have learned about yourself during this entire process. But what else have you learned about yourself dealing with a disorder such as lupus?
Honestly, I learned that, sometimes you just go through life with smaller issues, and you're thinking to yourself, this is a big deal, and you get a little stressed out about things, but there are levels. So I kind of, and this goes back to my mental and emotional health. I learned that, I learned, first of all, to have hope. Secondly, to have faith. And third, that some of the smaller things that I thought were a big deal are not that big of a deal. And, the biggest deal for me right now is my health.
So are you trying to say don't sweat the small stuff?
Don't sweat the small stuff, exactly.
Stress can really have a negative impact on anyone dealing with any type of adverse events, health event, I mean, anything. Even if you completely healthy, stress can impact your body and impact you on multiple fronts, like you mentioned, physically, emotionally, mentally, just different ways. So it's important to think positive, have a very positive circle, and it doesn't hurt to just be grateful in the small things. Like we woke up this morning. So me personally having the opportunity to speak to you, Juanice, is such a blessing, because we want to take this opportunity and again help to educate others that may be going through similar testimonies in life, one way or the other. So how can other people recognize the signs of lupus?
So as we know, lupus is complex. It can present itself in many different ways, but I think that in general, paying attention to your health, if something just does not feel right, if you're looking, I constantly am like looking at my body for moles or anything that's kind of out of the ordinary. But specifically to lupus, the symptoms that I had, if you find yourself, if you're realizing that, hey, I have Raynaud's syndrome, which was, the whitening in the fingertips, get that checked out. If you realize that, hey, I'm more tired than normal, I got enough sleep, why do I feel drained? Maybe I'm dehydrated. Let me drink some water. Water is vital, to our health as well. But, if it gets to a point where you feel like, okay, something's wrong, or this is not usual, it's very important to get some blood work done, because that can reveal a lot. If you have, that butterfly rash that I had, if you notice that, if you notice changes in your skin, if you notice, pain, pain in your heart. A month ago, I had some heart pains, and I immediately went to the doctor, and, there was a suspicion that it was pericarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart lining. That's another symptom, that's another thing that can happen when you have lupus, because as we know, it affects different organs. So I was cleared of that, thank goodness. But, normally I wouldn't, years ago, I should say, before I got the diagnosis, I wouldn't have paid attention to that. I would have thought, okay, I'm a little stressed out, let me just go about my day. So, nowadays, these are things that I pay attention to. And I think in general, if you have any pains, aches that are unusual, lethargy, if you notice you're coming in from the sun and your face is swollen, like what happens with me a lot of times, go get that checked out. Have your doctor, do some blood work. And also don't, I feel like, a lot of us, as we said before, you go by what your doctor says at face value. But sometimes your doctor may say, no, nothing's wrong with you. We don't need to run any tests. And for me, I'm like, okay, no, this is, I really feel like there's something going on. So sometimes you have to, really say, hey, I really think something's going on. Let's run some tests.
And not take it for granted.
Not take it for granted.
That is nothing. We actually have a few questions in the Q&A. And forgive me if I said chat. Please make sure that you are putting your questions in Q&A. One question is, did you lose weight?
Did I lose weight? That's hard to say because I was also very physically active back then. I don't remember having any, extreme weight loss. I tried to stay fit, especially after I got the diagnosis. So no, I wouldn't say that I lost any significant amount of weight.
I can personally say my weight was impacted by the roller coaster of being on steroids. So, and again, lupus can impact people differently. I know you mentioned that you actually deal with the increase of hair on your face. As it pertains to me, I dealt with the severe butterfly rash on my skin. So, and as it pertains to weight, whenever you mention diet, so someone asked, where can they find the lupus diet?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So lupusresearch.org is such a wonderful resource. Actually, I did the Lupus Research Alliance Lupus Walk last month, and that's the t-shirt that I'm wearing now. So, I mean, they're a great resource for all things lupus. The lupus diet is there. I use it, even though I normally eat healthy, but sometimes we need some reminders, some recipes, some reminders to get out and exercise, go for a walk, some reminders like, did you incorporate, some healthy food today, or are you eating all fried food? So lupusresearch.org is a really wonderful resource for all things lupus.
Yes, absolutely. Did you actually, when you dealt with lupus, did you kind of change your diet? Did you have to change, your stress level, anything that you had to cut off? And somebody actually asked too, did you think you had cancer?
Okay, let me answer the first question. I used to be a cigarette smoker.
Okay.
And I think as we all know, cigarettes are not healthy for you, especially if you have a disease, and absolutely if you have. So that was one really bad vice that I had to stop. Other than that, I think that I paid more attention to my stress levels. I mean, some level of stress is healthy. I think it pushes us forward.
Right.
But excessive stress can build up in our systems, and your immune system really pays attention to stress. So, that could be affected by stress. So really just honing in on excessive stress was probably the biggest thing besides not smoking cigarettes. And then the second question, yes, I did think I had cancer. And that's why I had to stop going down what I call the rabbit hole of trying to do my own research without actually going to a care team. Sometimes you feel like, okay, I'll just look this up and okay, that's what I have because here are the symptoms. My search just went out of this world. So, it was just really, things like that you gotta kind of have to be careful of.
I would tell anyone an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When in doubt, just get to the doctor and, you know, have them check you out, have a physical. I just had a colonoscopy yesterday, not because I was having any issues, but I just feel it's something you should do every 5 years. So we want to make sure we're encouraging each other to be as healthy as we can. We want to
Right,
live.
those annual checks. Those annual checks are so necessary. You know,
Yeah.
at certain ages, we have to get our colonoscopy. I just had my first one, you know, and there's so much trepidation when it comes to getting your colonoscopy, but it was easier, it was painless, it was easier than I thought it would be. And you know, that really does impact your health when you take the time to, you know, do your annual checkups and all those things that we know we're supposed to do, but we hesitate. It's important to take the time to do those things.
Absolutely. And one of the things we mentioned early on, lupus impacts everyone differently. It looks different. So if you think about it, whether you have discoid lupus, systemic lupus erythematosus, even drug-induced lupus, it looks different. So what does lupus look like for you on a day-to-day basis?
Every day is different. I mean, fortunately, knock on wood, I thank God every day that I'm not having, you know, daily symptoms. Sometimes I'll have a lupus flare up, and I'll take the time and just pull back on what I'm doing. You know, maybe one day I may, you know, this is a chronic illness, but as we know, it affects people differently. Maybe one day I'll really need to be back on the Plaquenil, you know, to manage my symptoms. But for now, I'm staying off of it as much as I can. You know, and I have a newer rheumatologist, and I spoke to him about it. And, you know, he hemmed and hawed for a while, and then he said, well, you know, just pay attention and let's, you know, make sure that you're okay before you start, you know, doing your own thing, so to speak. So, you know, on a daily basis, it's just me paying attention to my body. I have one friend who, you know, she also has an autoimmune disease, and she's the first one to be like, hey, I know you know, you had big plans this weekend. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself. You know, we're kind of each other's advocate in that way of just, you know, paying attention to that.
That is so important. It sounds like you have a very positive partnership with your rheumatologist.
Absolutely. I'm grateful for my rheumatology team now.
Okay.
And I keep them laughing because, you know, you gotta have a sense of humor, you know, no matter what. You know, that's a part of your mental, you know, stability and mental health also, having a positive outlook and just, you know, making sure that you take the time to have a little sense of humor sometimes.
Absolutely. You know, we mentioned how wonderful Now Included has been and everything that they are doing. And shout out to Tiffany, Dale, Rose, and the entire cohort of our Now Included family. And one of the things that I love is their social media platform, because technology is so important this day and time. So how have you relied on technology to help you overcome your various struggles with lupus?
Yeah, great question. So there's an app that I downloaded called Lupus Minder. And just, you know, looking through apps one day and trying to see, like, how can I, you know, there are many times that you put something on your calendar on your phone, and maybe you don't get a notification, or, you know, you realize, oh, let me add some notes to it. But I found this app called Lupus Minder that's the whole calendar, the whole app is about making sure that you stay on top of your lupus. So there's a calendar, you can get reminders to take your medicine. There's a place where you can jot down your medicine, the frequency of your dosage, There's a place where you can put your, your care team down and get reminders about certain things. You can write notes about your symptoms, and it keeps it all within, that one world. So it's all things lupus world. And that is one of the best, lupus related apps that I found. So it's called Lupus Minder.
That is phenomenal. You can always learn something new. I know I just did. So I'm going to be checking that out. I'm going to be checking out the lupus diet. And you have just been such a wealth of information. What keeps you so positive?
I think what keeps me positive is people around me. I don't know. I like to be happy, and I want to do things that make me happy and make me, keep my mental health in check. I feel like maybe I can help other people in some way, as long as I have the energy in my body, I want to be able to help other people. And I have no problem telling, my story. Maybe it'll help someone else. Who knows, but all we could do is I think there's something to be said about shared stories also.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about letting people know that you're not alone. There is someone else going through this, no matter what it is. I think the more that we talk about, different things, health, health and wellness, the more that perhaps we can help somebody else who may think that they're alone in what they're going through.
And you are never alone, anyone that's listening to us. And that's why I love the name Now Included, because you are now included in our family. So there's no reason to ever be alone. We have just a minute left, and I wanted to get you to just share a word of encouragement to all those that's listening now or may potentially listen later.
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing is you're not alone. You're really not. Whether, no matter what you're going through, it's really important to connect, whether you're connecting in person, whether you're connecting virtually. I know some people who are shy, who don't, necessarily, feel comfortable with a face-to-face connection. I think, doing things over Zoom and getting some resources for what you may be going through is really important. The Now Included community, you guys have been absolutely wonderful. I mean, Now Included is great. Even if you personally don't have an ailment or a disease, it's still wonderful to have a community of people surrounding you. And I think that I really encourage people to, reach out a little bit maybe outside of your comfort zone. But there are many ways to communicate and to be communicated to. So just finding that communication highway, if you're going through something, I think is really important. And I encourage people to do that.
Juanice, you are phenomenal. You are beautiful. You are inspiring. You are
as well.
And I thank you for taking your time to be an inspiration to those who join us today. And again, those who will be joining us. I also want to acknowledge Now Included again for everything that they are doing, being a game changer of love and hope for health equity. And we want to thank each and every one of you all for joining us today. We hope that you found something encouraging, if nothing else, Juanice's beautiful smile. And my words of encouragement, I always say, I don't live with lupus, lupus lives with me. But my words of encouragement is to know how awesome you are, how beautiful you are, and the impact that you can make, positive, exponential impact for not only yourself, but others and for generations to come. So continue spreading the love. And if you don't know about Now Included, it's time to get now included and now included. And let me admonish you that the best is still yet to come, but we have to be helpers one to another. We love you. We thank God for you. And Juanice, thank you again, love.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, now included.
You all take care. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us.